Hello Serie A fan. Lazio's Vatican visit inspires divine performance, and Roma have a week from hell. Juve find themselves in purgatory with a loss and a trophy, but Gianpaolo finally pays for his sins. Meanwhile, Milan pray for a result to pip Inter to the winter crown. We talk about all that and round up the transfers and other Serie A gossip in this episode of Scudetto. Hello and welcome to Scudetto. We are very nearly at the halfway point of the season. Just one more round of games and we'll be crowning the winter champions. The question is, which club from Milan will it be? And here to address that question and many others this week is Boaz Sachs. Boaz, how are you getting on?
I'm doing very well. How are you doing, Oscar?
Yeah, I am all right, thank you. Boaz, before we get into it, we should highlight you've been doing a spot of moonlighting this week, appearing on a different podcast every night, or at least for the last two nights. You were a guest yesterday on Milan Obsession.
Yeah, I've lent my considerable vocal talents to some other projects. It was actually a really good experience and nice to speak about Milan for a change. And as an aside, someone accused me of having a Milan obsession this week as well. So it was quite funny that I got the call up right after he.
Yeah, it's an apt podcast for you to be on. But yeah, for any of our listeners that want to check it out, Boaz and the host Elaine have, I'd describe it as a wide-ranging discussion on all things Milan. So if that's your thing, definitely check it out.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, Boaz is let off the leash and just allowed to talk about Milan for an entire podcast. So yeah, our regular listeners will note that Kenny's absent this week. He's just dealing with some family matters. He should be back in the starting lineup, hopefully very soon. So without further ado, let's move on to the beers. Boaz, what have you got for us this week? In fact, you're drinking for all three of us because I'm still not drinking and Kenny's obviously not here.
Yeah, so the virtual studio feels a bit empty, so I figured I'd up the ante since I'm the only one drinking, and I got myself a Brewdog Double Punk. It's 8.2%, so I think that covers at least two of us.
Yeah, I've been banging on about ginger beer for a couple of episodes now, but it's absolutely delicious. The Pimento Gingembre, spicy ginger. I mean, if you like ginger beer and you like chilies, you're going to like it. Check it out.
I'm very curious about that stuff.
Other ginger beers are available. We are not yet sponsored by this ginger beer manufacturer. Okay, so let's start off with a game we discussed before it was played last week, the Rome derby. And we said that Lazio would maybe have divine intervention after having been blessed by the Pope, and they ran out 3-0 winners. So perhaps there was something to that. We need to start by just praising Lazio, really, don't we, Baz? They were very impressive.
Definitely. And in a week where Roma had been on a really good winning streak and were third in the league and Lazio were still behind, I definitely expected a more balanced match. Instead, what we got was a masterclass from Inzaghi, who kind of outplayed Fonseca and played him at his own game. Overall, their Lazio performance was brilliant all around, possibly slightly aided by the fact that Roma didn't seem to have showed up on the night.
Yeah, the defending was a bit of a shambles, wasn't it? I mean, the tackle for the first goal maybe is a little bit of bad fortune there. Like the tackle, was it Ibanez that tried to make the tackle? And
so Ibanez has been unfortunately getting some death threats since this game, but while I don't condone sending players death threats, I think he had a shocker. Firstly, he lost the ball that led to the first goal, and he was also very responsible for the second goal. It's quite sad because he was having a pretty good season up until this moment, and I mean, he just turned off.
Yeah, maybe won't say what I was going to about his performance. I wasn't aware of that situation, but actually, I don't think the responsibility is so much on him as an individual. It just seems like Roma still don't really know what their back three is. I mean, you've got, I guess, Smalling, Ibanez and Cristante have been the favoured three most of the time, but you've also had Kumbula coming in and out, and Fazio. It just seems like the organisation's not quite there.
I don't really get the point of dropping Cristante into defence when you signed a very good centre-back from Verona in the summer, Kumbula that is, and it doesn't show trust in your recruitment, let's put it that way.
Yeah, and even the goalkeeper, right? I mean, they don't seem to be able to make up their minds between Mirante and Paul Lopez. Paul Lopez seems to be back in favour. I don't know if Mirante picked up a slight knock.
I'm not sure either, but This is maybe a slightly larger discussion, but it's always strange when a manager decides to pick and swap between his keepers. It's the position where you expect some sort of solidity, and perhaps that shows how much Roma distrust their backline. We were talking, I think it was around October when Milan played Roma, and the Mirante had a phenomenal game in that match, and we thought that Roma had settled on a keeper, but Pau Lopez is back in, so obviously Fonseca is not convinced by either of his keepers.
Yeah, no, it's true. I guess we should give the Roma at least one positive point, not necessarily from this game, but in general they've looked very good in attack. I mean, we've given honourables in recent weeks to Villa, Mkhitaryan, obviously Edin
I feel
Dzeko
we
is
may have jinxed
high up the
them.
honourable tables. Yeah, but I mean they have looked good, and yeah, it would be a shame to see Fonseca lose his job, as we know there've been rumours going around.
It's not been the best week for Fonseca. I will get on to it in a second, but the cup display was pretty abysmal as well. But the rumors going around are that either Sarri or Allegri are in the mix, and obviously Friedkin have the budget to bring in a big name coach. The question is, can you convince him, and would he buy onto the project?
Yeah, we'll talk about that cup game. We should just give an honourable mention to Lazio for the goal, shouldn't we?
Yeah, it was the last goal, the third goal, was kind of a cherry on the top, but essentially every single player on the team touched the ball. I think there was 22 passes that led to the goal, and even the way Luis Alberto finished it, it was kind of like a snooker shot. If you're going to win a derby, that's the best exclamation mark to put on the final goal.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was on the team's official Twitter, but there was definitely a video doing the rounds on Twitter where as soon as a player touched the ball, like their headshot came up at the
That was a
bottom of
bit
the
busy,
screen.
wasn't
Quite
it?
nice.
It was a bit, some social media manager was working overtime.
A busy infographic, but I quite enjoyed it. At least in full screen, it's pretty good. Maybe not on the phone; it's a little bit cluttered.
And since we just mentioned Luis Alberto, I guess it's a good opportunity to wish him all the best. He was rushed into hospital in midweek with burst appendix. Having scored 2 goals in the derby, he kind of went from one of the most incredible highs ever to one of the most incredible lows, and we wish him all the best.
Yeah, and we should just. I mean, we've already spoken about Roma being a shambles for quite a long time in the podcast, but we should definitely mention the cup game that they lost to Spezia 4-2. They had also a man sent off. Mancini got sent off, but perhaps more incredibly, they managed to make an illegal amount of substitutions. So
the fans were expecting some sort of reaction from the team following the derby, and I know there's no fans in the stadium, but this was a home game against newly promoted side Spezia. I mean, they went 2-0 down, and they managed to somehow drag themselves back into the game, and then they just shot themselves in the foot. There was 2 red cards within the space of a minute. And then what you mentioned, Fonseca made his 6th sub with seemingly everyone oblivious to it, except for Pellegrini, who kept saying on the pitch, "Hey, that's our 6th sub, that's our 6th sub," but no one was listening to him. So I mean, I know that the guy who is in charge of the liaison between the players and the team has been fired over this, and now there's a whole hoo-ha in the capital about that the players want him back because he's a very popular character. And obviously, I mean, it's quite a funny story, but if you consider that Roma also managed to cock up their team sheet on the first day of the season against Verona, this is for the same club to make clerical errors twice is just ridiculous.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. That was really shocking, wasn't it? And yeah, I mean, you think like they've got this new owner who's going to kind of professionalize the structure and bring in proper accounting policies and all that kind of thing. It's yeah, just disappointing, definite dishonourable to, I'm not really sure, just to the club in general, I think.
I'm happy to give them a dishonourable because it's been a horrible week. And I mean, as we said, Fonseca's job is currently in peril. The new sporting director they brought in is also Portuguese, so I guess that plays in his favor. By all accounts, right now, the owners want to keep Fonseca around, but one more of these shock results, and I'd be worried if I was him.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, well, let's take a positive from that game, though, shall we? Because there was an absolutely lovely goal scored by Spezia's Riccardo Saponara.
Yeah, he's a kind of a a journeyman and someone who's all Serie A fans will recognize. He should have been the Serie B's Kaká. They mentioned him, and Milan signed him. Didn't really make it. He also played for Fiorentina. Never really showed his full talent, but as that, I suggest people check out his goal because when he turns it on, he's a bit of a magician. And I should say that because Roma made the sixth sub, technically Spezia could have asked for the game to be won 3-0, but obviously they preferred to keep the 4-2 result, which is a lot better for their history.
Yeah, and a lovely goal. Do check it out. Right, we need to move on. Let's talk about the other game that we previewed on the last pod. So that was Inter Juve. Inter obviously coming out 2-0 winners. I mean, clearly it's a pretty big result in terms of the title race, isn't it? I was personally a little bit disappointed by that actual game. I don't know what you made of it, Boaz.
It wasn't the best of spectacles, but perhaps this is down to the fact that Juventus never really showed up. I'm still waiting for them to get to San Siro. There was a surprising lack of bite or a will to win in the team, and I also think Pirlo's team selection, which was partly affected by injuries and COVID, but still team selection kind of played into Conte and Inter's hands.
Yeah, I saw Pirlo's comments after the game seemed to be kind of laying the blame at the feet of the players, didn't he? Was saying things like, "Oh, when the players aren't hungry or when they don't win the duels, there's nothing I can do." Which I always think I mean, maybe it's true, but when a manager comes out and says that, you kind of think maybe you ought to be doing a bit more.
It's kind of weird because when you listen to Pirlo talking, it sounds like he's been a manager for many years. In the sense that every single quote he gives is that typical manager quote that the copy paste quote. He never slips out of line, which I guess is part of the Juventus style, and it's good that he sticks to his line. But at the same time, as you said, kind of the team was very quiet, and you expect maybe he could make some changes from the bench like he did in the Milan game.
Yeah, maybe that's what you learn when you do your Italian coaching badges.
You get a big book of football cliches. Yeah. If you lose 2-1, this is what you say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I mean, sort of broader picture and the kind of narrative for Juve. Obviously, we thought maybe they were done in the title race, then they beat Milan. They're kind of back in it. What do we think now? I kind of get the feeling that we're at the point where kind of Juve, Roma, and Atalanta are sort of out of the title race, and it's shaping up to be between the two Milan sides and Napoli.
The way this season is going, I wouldn't discount these clubs, particularly Juventus, just now. But definitely, this is a big step in moving the title away from Turin. And at the moment, it looks like it will be in Milan. I don't know which club. As you said, and this touches on something that Kenny mentioned last episode, or that it's a very roller coaster season. And 1 week you're beating someone at San Siro, Milan in this case. The next week you're kind of struggling. It's not clear if this is down to the calendar, if it's down to Pirlo being a very new manager, or just the fact that maybe Juventus have pushed this group of players as far as they can go, and it's time for a real rejuvenation.
Yeah, and actually, just before we move on, I do want to give a kind of honourable to Barella. We said that Inter didn't really do anything different, but actually, as you highlighted, Barella was played a bit further forward. He had a very good game, kind of linking up with Lukaku, and actually, I thought kind of a position that Christian Eriksen used to like to play at Tottenham, kind of off the striker. So obviously, there is space for that position.
Conte said he doesn't have a trequartista.
Yeah.
Touching on Barella, I think we in the first international break that we had since we've been doing the podcast, and around the time that Milan signed Tonali, I think we said that Barella was probably the best Italian prospect out there, and the stuff he's been doing since his transfer from Cagliari has just been phenomenal. And even though he plays for my bitter rivals, I look forward to whatever he will do with his career for the next 10 years.
Yes. So, actually, one more thing we should say on Juve as well, just because obviously we've been saying how Pirlo's really underperforming. He did just win his first managerial trophy, the Italian Super Cup. They beat Napoli 2-0 in the final last night as we record. But it's just, I mean, I'm obviously primarily a Premier League fan, and I know a lot of our listeners follow that league as well. just for those of us that do, do people in Italy care more about this than we care about the Charity Shield?
I think that the Charity Shield is a very apt comparison. I think that the club that wins it will always be happy because winning a trophy is always good. But in general, I don't think fans of other clubs particularly care, especially now with the format that it's supposed to be in Saudi Arabia. I mean, this week it was played in Reggio Emilia in Italy because of COVID, but Serie A signed a deal with to have this final played for the next 3 or 4 seasons in the UAE. So, it's kind of, or Saudi Arabia. Sorry, not sure about my geography, but somewhere in that area.
Not the first time those two countries have been confused on on this podcast. It's all good. Okay, what else? Oh, we should quickly mention that Marco Giampaolo's been sacked by Torino.
It's quite funny because Giampaolo's Torino played Spezia on the weekend, and Spezia were down to 10 men from about the 5th minute, and Torino mustered 2 shots on target, both of which were in the extra time of the second half and added time. So, and Giampaolo was giving it all that in the post-match. Of course, my job is secure. And even Torino's owner, Cairo, was saying, yeah, we're sure that Giampaolo's going to stick around. And of course, a few hours later, it was announced that he'd been relieved from his role.
Fantastic stuff.
And they brought in Davide Nicola, who last year managed to save Genoa from relegation, so kind of a non-relegation specialist, so to speak. He also did some great things with Crotone, and he's a former Turin player, so kind of a nice circle.
It's like the Italian Big Sam, basically.
Yeah, maybe. Let's make a note and we'll think about that. If he does well at Torino, he's a likable Big Sam.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, so Torino are currently 18th, so in relegation position with just 13 points, so not the biggest surprise.
And they didn't manage to win a single game at home in the whole season so far.
Okay, we'll do a quick transfer roundup.
Before we do that, we touched upon the Super Cup. We should speak about Napoli as well. They destroyed Fiorentina 6-0 in a game that, if you look at the XG, Fiorentina weren't that much worse than Napoli, but Napoli just managed to get all their shots on target, and they played some great football. On behalf of our good friend Kenneth, who's not with us, we want to give an honourable mention to Insigne for a ridiculous pass that was kind of Maradona-esque for one of those goals, and it's great to see. Since I'm a bit of a Scrooge, I'm going to give him a dishonourable mention as well, because in the Super Cup yesterday, he missed his third penalty against Juventus, and the guy's missed 4 penalties in his whole career, so that means that 75% of the penalties he's missed are against Juventus. Maybe again, like we spoke about Milan a few weeks ago, maybe someone else should be taking these pens.
Yeah, he's catching up with Zlatan almost on the number of missed.
And Zlatan took a penalty this week, which I went for Kessie on the pitch, which really was problematic for my heart.
He scored it though, didn't he?
Yeah.
Okay. So quick transfer roundup, and then we'll briefly look ahead to the third Scudetto derby this season. So yeah, Fiorentina have signed Kokorin, announced via his Instagram. I think he said something like, "I'm basically a Fiorentina player. I just need to do the medical." Right? I mean, it was translated from Russian, but
I'm sure that's not the way player announcements should happen. I'm sure, like, probably the best thing to do is to have your medical and have the official team announce it. But this Kokorin is, by all accounts, not an orthodox player. He actually sat in jail for a year for beating someone up, and he's been in trouble various times in the past. Apparently, that's all behind him now, and he's been doing really well in the Russian league. And I should also add that when Fabio Capello was managing Russia, apparently Kokorin was his one of his favorite players and one of the guys he'd always call up. So I'm not really sure what Fiorentina are getting with this player, but at the same time, we keep saying that they need someone with experience up front to score goals because their front line was very young, and Cutrone is now going back to Wolves.
Yeah. Other transfers, we spoke about Mandzukic last week. That's now official.
I should say that one of the Italian radios had the good, the bad, and the ugly theme playing in the background, and they were showing. They were saying that Zlatan, Pioli, and Mandzukic were one of these.
And you can decide which.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like Pioli is the good, and then it's up to you who's the ugly and who's the bad.
Yeah. Not sure I'd be calling either of them ugly to their faces.
Exactly.
So yeah, Arkadiusz Milic has signed for Marseille. He was a bit of a podcast favourite, despite not playing a game in Serie A since we started this podcast. Bit of a surprising move.
Exactly. This one is an odd one because in the summer we were talking about a possible Roma destination or even Juventus. At some point in the middle of the season, Atletico Madrid were supposedly heavily rumored. Instead, he's moving to Marseille, who, in fairness, have shown interest in him throughout this whole period, and we're the only club that were kind of willing to match De Laurentiis' his demands. So, unfortunately, for people who like silky players, Milic will be playing in France and not in Serie A for the foreseeable future.
Good stuff. Right, we are running out of time, but quick thoughts, Boaz. What are you looking forward to about the third Scudetto derby, Milan versus Atalanta this weekend?
First of all, Milan have to avenge a 5-0 defeat around this time last season. Frank Kessie has said that this defeat has kind of motivated Milan to go on this amazing run that they've been on since then. At the time, it felt like two clubs on very different paths. Fortunately for Milan, Atalanta are slightly stuttering at the moment. And this is the chat where I wish Kenny was here because obviously his knowledge of Atalanta is slightly better than mine. I kind of joked before we recorded that to me, the Hattenberg and Freuler are all pretty interchangeable. I mean, if you showed me pictures of them, I'm not sure I could name them. I know they play for Atalanta. I'm just not sure which is which. But I'm a fan of Atalanta's. I love the way they play. So I hope for a good game. And I think if Milan gets 1 point, they'll be definitive winter champions. And if they win, obviously they will be winter champions. But Atalanta can threaten, and they can definitely get the job done.
Yeah, I mean, most of the Scudetto derbies this season have been quite high scoring. So I think we'll probably be safe in predicting another high scoring game.
And of course, Kenny is leading that table because he has 3 points against your Roma, whereas me and you have 1 point each. I've played one less.
Points in that very badly officiated game.
Definitely.
Okay, good stuff. You know what? We've been peppering the honourables and dishonourables kind of throughout the episode, but we do have a couple more. You want to kick us off with the dishonourable for Salamakas?
Yeah, I mean, Alexis Salamaker, the Belgian winger from Milan, he just came back from an injury and he was thrown on by Pioli. At the time when Milan have got pretty bad injury crisis and a lot of COVID issues. I should add before we go to Salamakas that Theo Hernandez was given he was given a false positive, so he will be available for Atalanta. It looked like he was going to be missing it, but it's good to know that he was back.
He'll be up against one of those Atalanta fullbacks, either
exactly.
or yeah.
They're good. So they're so good that you can't remember their name because they're going past you so fast. But Stanemaker managed to come on in the 64th minute, I believe, and got his first booking in the 66th minute, and then managed to get sent off within 8 minutes for a very silly foul. And obviously he'll miss the Atalanta game, and it's just very silly. Dishonourable mention for me.
Yeah. And what else do we have? We've got an honourable for Lecce fans.
This was kind of a funny Serie A story, but Lecce's fans made up a Turkish striker that they were going to sign, and this kind of caught steam, and all the fan sites were writing about this fictional player, I should add. And eventually the official club account and the team manager posted the pictures with them with this fake player and announced that they signed him. He's going to wear the 69 shirt, so there you have it.
Did you say he was Turkish, the made-up striker?
Yeah.
On the topic of Turkish football, do you want to give a dishonourable?
Yeah, I mean, there was Başakşehir, the Turkish champions, I believe. They signed a Milan defender, Duarte, who isn't particularly good. So, I mean, his spell at Milan was full of injuries, and he only played about 6 games. But when he did play, he seemed like a bit of a liability. But anyway, because his first name is Leonardo, they had him dress up as Leonardo, the Ninja Turtle. And they also signed a player called Rafa, and so he was Raphael. And it's just ridiculous, and it's such a tenuous link. And I think, as I said on another podcast, come back to me when you manage to sign a player called Michelangelo and a player called Donatello, then I'll be impressed.
Yeah, and another honourable from a game that we're not going to get to. Samp beat Udinese 2-1, and you wanted to give Torregrossa an honourable.
Torregrossa was signed from Serie B's Brescia 4 days before this game, and he got his debut goal, which was also the winner against Udinese. So I think that deserves an honourable for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And one more dishonourable this is for Capo Plaza.
Capo Plaza is a leading hip hop star in Italy, and he's actually about to drop his new album in the next 24 hours. But his video clip for his latest song, Allenamento 4, was basically him and his mates messing around in San Siro. And to be honest, it gave me major FOMO. I want to be in that stadium. But also, it's kind of annoying that this guy is prancing about in San Siro when most people can't get into the stadium.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to the time we can be back.
Yeah.
I was going to say, we didn't get to this in the transfer roundup. So do you want to...
Yeah, I mean, this is quite a curious one, but Milan should be signing Chelsea defender Tomori in the next few days. He will be the first British player to sign for a European club and not be a EU player since Brexit. So one of those things, crazy.
Yeah, and on that note, that definitely is all we've got time for. I think we did pretty well there without Kenny Baird.
Yeah, maybe we don't need him.
I mean, you have to compete for his place in the starting lineup next week.
It felt like we were down, like Spezia, we were down to 10 men from the 5th minute of the game. Let's be honest.
Yeah, our managers change the goalkeeper every week. All right, yeah, thanks. That definitely is all we've got time for. We will speak to you next week, hopefully with Kenny alongside us. Until then, please, if you don't already, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you get your audio. Speak to you next week. Enjoy the football.
Che sta decretando lo scudetto del Milan in questo preciso istante. La Juventus è campione d'Italia questa data, il 6 maggio. La Roma è campione d'Italia per la stagione 2020.